Hey, thanks for joining me. Last month I reviewed this extremely capable AC300 system with two of these B300 battery expansions, giving me a total of 3,000 watts of continuous power output and over 6 kilowatt hours of battery capacity, along with the capability of taking up to 2,400 watts of solar input. And even with or without the solar input, this configuration can easily power all of the critical 120 volt circuits in your house. And since it's modular, you can also easily, or relatively easily, take some or all of it with you on the road if you need to, making this one of the most versatile power backup solutions on the market. But what if you want or need to be able to run 240 volt circuits as well? Maybe you've got a well pump or central air conditioning system. Well, you can actually connect two of these AC300 systems together and form a split phase 240 volt capability, and you're also doubling your continuous power output to 6,000 watts, which pretty much lets you power, all the things. And BLUETTI also offers an optional home integration kit, which is basically this guy right here, along with a few other bits and pieces that are actually relatively important. And these will allow you to easily connect the system to your home service panel that will allow you to provide backup power to your 10 most critical circuits. Okay, since this is really the first time that I've ever actually talked about a system with this kind of capability in terms of battery and inverter capacity, let's have a quick chat about what you can and cannot do with the AC300 combo system. So let me ask you, so for example, will this run?
Yes.
Hey, wait a minute, I didn't specify anything yet.
Dude, did you not read the title of the video? It runs all the things.
Well, hold on a second. There's got to be some exceptions, right? Okay, just hear me out. Will this thing run, say, a Wi-Fi router, my big screen TV, my sound system, and my refrigerator?
Yep, no problem.
All at once?
What part of no problem did you not understand?
Are you always this snarky?
Only when I feel like I'm talking to myself.
Fair point. Moving on, could I run my electric water heater and my furnace off this system?
Yep, that works too, since the dual setup lets you run 120 volt loads and 240 volt loads like the water heater.
Okay, all right. What about my central air conditioning system?
That's actually going to depend on the size of your air conditioning system, and the 3-ton unit that you have is going to require at least 6,500 watts of continuous output when that compressor is running. And so this dual AC300 setup is not quite big enough for that.
My electric range in my microwave oven?
Well, let's see. Most electric ranges are going to operate between 1,000 and 3,000 watts, depending on how many burners that you're running at any one time. And most electric ovens are going to run between 2,000 and 5,000 watts. And your typical full-size microwave oven is going to use about 1,500 watts. So yeah, you can definitely run all those things with this system, but you'd also definitely need to be careful not to use them all at the same time at full capacity, or you're definitely going to exceed that 6,000 watt continuous output limit and trip that overload shutdown protection.
All right, that's good to know. But what if I did need to run more than 6,000 watts at one time?
Well, in that case, you might want to consider something like BLUETTI's EP900 or maybe the dual AC500 systems. Those can handle 9,000 and 10,000 watt loads respectively.
Oh man, the stupid things I do for YouTube, and now I have to grow it all back. All right, enough horsing around. Let's go put this thing together and find out how it all works. All right, let's take a look at how we connect these batteries to the AC300. Now, I did cover this in some detail in my previous video on the AC300 system, but I also got something wrong because I didn't have two of them to hook up, and I misstated something about these ports here. Now, the top one is obviously where you do your AC charging. This middle one here is where you have a connection to both of the two MPPT charge controllers, DC charge controllers. You see there's 4 pins here. And so this is for DC input 1 and DC input 2. And if we take a look at the DC cable, the charging cable for solar input that comes with the AC300, it connects into this port, and it's got 2 sets of MC4 connectors. And I also was a little confused at first when I first saw this cable, because it's got a DC charger on it for a car, but it's also got MC4s, which is a little unusual. But basically how this works is if, let's say you were putting this in a van or an RV and you wanted to be able to charge from your car's 12 volt system and via solar at the same time, you can do that using this one cable and this adapter. So you'd plug this into one side, connect these guys here to say either DC1 or DC2. And these connectors, by the way, are labeled accordingly, the little white labels here. So right now I've got them on DC2, and then I would go into the menu system and say that I am using a, not for solar, I'm using a DC, a standard DC charging input. Kind of bypasses the charge controller or puts the charge controller in a different mode. But so the two charge controllers here can each handle 1200 watts of solar. And that's up to between 12 and 150 volts DC. And it's capped at 12 amps. And why that's important is because, so say for one side, if you were just using one set of MC4 cables and you're putting 1200 watts of solar, a typical 400 watt solar panel is going to give you a voltage open circuit of around 40 volts. And so 40 times 3 gives you 120 volts if you connect them in series. And that is well within the 150 volt range that the MPPT charge controller has. And then you can do that 2 times in a row, or basically mirror that input, and then get 2400 watts of solar in on this thing. So I just wanted to clarify, what I had done on my previous video on the AC300 is I had incorrectly stated that DC1 was here and DC2 was here. That's actually not true. DC1 and 2 are both on this center connector. This bottom port is basically how you connect two AC300s together using the communications cable. And that's really all that that port is. It's just the communications connection to allow you to parallel two of these AC300 units together. All right, now let's take a look at how you're going to connect the batteries to the main unit. So each battery comes with its own large parallel cable here. And so I'm going to go ahead and do the bottom one first. And I'm going to use the top port. I don't think it actually matters. And then we lock it into place. And then I'm going to put this in the bottom port. And again, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the middle battery. As soon as you hear it snap, there's a little lock button. And then I'm going to put that one up here on top. And you can see there's nice rubberized caps for these to keep dust and debris and dirt out of these cables. And I got them all locked into place, which is important because you don't want these connected in an operation and have one of these cables get pulled. They're friction fit pretty tight anyway, but then there's a latch and a lock. So they've really done a nice job at making sure that none of these get accidentally pulled out during operation, where you can end up causing a problem with one of these units. So basically, when you're connecting two of these together, or two of these AC300s together, you get your battery array connected to the main unit. You do that on the other unit, and then you connect the two units via the communications cable. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this setup on the other stack over here.
All right, to complete our connection here, I do have my communications cable, which is again that third port down, connected to both AC300 units. And then this also comes with the home integration kit, which is the dual TT30 or RV30 connectors here. And these go into each of these ports. And then the other end is an L1430R, which goes into the manual transfer switch right there. So let me go ahead and connect this cable up. And this end, as I said, goes into the manual transfer switch. And this is a twist lock connector, so it's an L1430, and you got to match up that little keyed ground plug slot right there with the one on your connector, your manual transfer switch. Then you give it a little twist to the right, and now it can't pop out. All right, so we've got our two 120 volt 30 amp outputs combining into our switch box. Now we need to make sure that these are both in split phase mode. I believe that they already are, but I have labeled them 1 and 2 so I can differentiate them in the app if I'm looking at them. And 1 should be the one that's assigned as the master. Really doesn't matter, but 1 has to be a master, 1 has to be the slave. So before I turn anything on up here, let me go ahead and power these up. All right, so I'm going to do this setup first on the master and then very quickly do it on the one that's going to be the slave as well. And you kind of want to do these fairly quickly because as soon as I set this as the master, it will immediately look for the slave, which is not ready there yet, and you'll start getting some alarms. So we are going to get some alarms when we do this. I'm going to go ahead and go into settings and then next, and then we have under machine type, you see single phase. I'm going to go ahead and get to that same screen over here on the on my second 300. And then I'm going to go into single phase. I'm going to do that on the other one. And then here I'm going to go tell it I want to do split phase. And this will be the master. Now you can hear it alarming immediately. And the setting on the slave unit will be the only setting that I can select. And then I'll go back to home and you can see that the alarms should have cleared out, and you can see it now says split phase. And it says split phase, or should say split phase, if you're successful on both units. So I'll go ahead and go back to the home screen. And yeah, so I do see split phase on both units. And that's really all there is to the setup. All right, so these are both, this is at 96%, this is at 98% state of charge. We're going to talk about AC charging in just a minute. But let's go ahead and get this thing hooked up. I want to run my electric water heater off of this. Now it says that the total watt draw on my water heater is 5,500 watts. And we're going to find out if that is correct. So this should be pushing the limits of this AC300 at its total 6,000 watt draw. So it should be pulling just under 3,000 watts from each side. So we're going to find out how long this thing will last, because I don't really know how often this kicks on, and specifically how much power it typically draws. I just have what its spec rating is. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And to turn on the AC inverter, to energize that connection up there, we do it from the master. So 301 is the master. Go ahead and turn on the AC input. It will turn on the AC inverter here. It'll kick on the AC inverter over here automatically, as that just came on as well. So we now have 240 volt split phase going into our manual transfer switch. So if you watch my previous AC300 video, in this particular location on this panel, you'll notice that this switch box is different. This is actually what used to be there. And I actually much prefer the one that comes with the AC integration kit, or the home integration kit from BLUETTI. And so I bought another one to match that. So I actually have two of these now. The other reason that I did that is actually probably more important, because this actually has 30 amp 240 on A and B, and this one only has 20 amps on these potentially combined circuits here. These are both 20 amps, and that actually is not enough for my water heater. So this is a 30 amp circuit that I'm mapping over from my sub panel to A and B, and so these need to be 30 amps as well to be safe and to not get a bunch of nuisance trips constantly. So that is probably the main reason I switched this out, but I switched it out with the same one that comes with the home integration kit, because I do prefer this format a lot better than this format. Okay, so let me put this aside. All right, time for the moment of truth. So these breakers are all on. I'm gonna go ahead and kick on the switch over to generator power. All right, so if you look over here, you can see I do have power to my water heater, my electric water heater, and the AC is on. We are not currently really pulling enough power to even register on these, because the elements have obviously not kicked on. So I'm going to let this run in this state for 24 hours, and we're going to find out how much power this electric water heater runs or consumes over the course of that 24 hours, just to get a sense. Now, obviously, your mileage may vary if you happen to have an electric water heater. Depends on the size of your family, how many people are running hot water all the time, whether you're running the dishwasher, whether you're washing clothes, lots of people taking hot showers. All that is going to impact how much power you're actually using in a 24-hour period. But I just want to get a sense for under our normal 2-person and 2-adult household what we can expect out of that hot water heater. So I'm going to leave this running just like this, and we'll find out. Now, as I mentioned before, that video that I did on how to install a manual transfer switch, it is much easier than you probably think. If you haven't watched that, and I will put a link up here for you to go check that out. But having said that, do keep in mind that anytime you're working with electricity, you have to know a little bit about what you're doing, and you have to know how to take the proper precautions. And I would also highly recommend that you look into your particular location where you live to find out if you require a permit to do this work, number one. And in some cases, you might actually even require an electrician, a licensed electrician, to do this work. But that is not the case in every location, certainly not the case in mine. And in fact, where I live, I don't actually even need a permit to do this. Although it would still be wise to pull a permit for it and have at the very least, have an inspector come and double check your work. Just to be safe. All right, let's talk real quick about the home integration kit, because I do think that BLUETTI has done something very convenient and actually cost effective here as well. If you're going to be connecting two of these together and you want to connect these to your home service panel through a manual transfer switch, the home integration kit is actually a pretty decent deal from BLUETTI because it actually gives you everything you need, and you're going to save over $100 versus trying to buy everything separately. So what does the home integration kit come with? Well, it comes with the manual transfer switch, and it comes with the L1430 connector right here, the inlet connector. A lot of times those don't come with the manual transfer switch. You have to buy those separately. Sometimes they're bundled, but in any case, the one from BLUETTI does come with that. It also comes with the main TT30 cable, as I mentioned here, that allows you to put input into from both units into the manual transfer switch. It comes with the communications cable that's required to connect the two AC300s together. And it also comes with this 240 volt AC charging cable. This is basically a Y cable that allows you to charge both units at the same time. And this is actually really handy because there's an aspect to the AC charging when you're using a split phase setup that most people would probably not anticipate. And so let me describe what that's about. But before I do, the integration kit also comes with the 240 volt L14 plug that you would connect this AC cable to. And it's got a faceplate. Now it doesn't come with an electrical box or the cabling to actually wire this. So I'm actually going to install this. I haven't been able to do it yet because I have ordered a 2-pole 30 amp breaker for my electrical box that I'm still waiting on. It's not going to be here for a few more days. So I'm going to install this, but here's the reason why this would be handy. When you buy the AC300s, they come with an AC charging cable, right? The standard AC charging cable, charging it via 120. And that goes in that little top of the 3 input ports here on the side. Now, when you have these connected in split phase mode, you can't use an AC charging cable on the same phase for both units. So if I have a couple of plugs in my wall next to where I have these set up, and I plug the cable that comes with these individually, these AC300s, and they're on the same phase, they will not charge. They have to be charged from separate phases. And so you could, if you have outlets that are on different phases, and I'll actually show you in a minute how to check that, you could get away with just using these cables with the AC300s themselves, and because you're charging on different phases. But if you want to be able to charge fast, have them all connected into one spot. That's where this splitter cable charging at 240 split phase really comes in handy. So let's take a quick look here. Let me show you how you can determine whether or not your 2 outlets that you may be thinking about are actually split phase or not, and just kind of see how all that works. All right, when you're looking at an outlet, usually the large slot over here on the left is the neutral, and the hot is the smaller slot here on the right. And if you want to know the voltage between 2 outlets to see if they're on different phases or not, there's a pretty simple way that you can test that using a multimeter. So you got to make sure you're on voltage AC, not DC. And then basically you take your 2 probes, and if I were to check from hot to hot on an outlet that is on the same phase, I am not going to get hardly any voltage out of that. So if I go up here, and again, it doesn't really matter which probe I use on which one as long as I'm measuring hot to hot. But you can see my voltage drops to basically 0. It's 0 point something, right? It's almost nothing. Whereas if I go from hot to neutral, you can see I'm getting 122 volts, and that would be the same even if I moved it up here to the top one. Still getting 122 volts. Now I do have an outlet that is on a different phase. I know it's a different phase because I know which breaker it's plugged into, and I'm using an extension cord here. So if I go from this hot up on the outlet to this hot on the extension cord, watch what happens. I get 245 volts, and that's my indicator that these are in fact on different phases, different legs of those 2 in 120 volt legs coming into my service. So if I charge one unit from one of the AC300s from this 120 outlet and one of the AC300s from this 120 outlet, while they're connected in split phase, they will charge. And that is one way to do this without having to wire a 240 volt L1430 outlet. So you can do it that way, and this is how you would check to make sure that the 2 outlets you might want to use are on different phases. Yeah, so hopefully you found that helpful. It's just a quick and easy way to see if 2 outlets are on the same phase or not. Whether or not connecting them will allow you to, separately to these AC300s, allow you to charge that way or not. So that said, I do think that the integration kit that BLUETTI has is a good deal if you want to connect it to your house, because it does give you everything you need, and you're actually, believe it or not, saving a little money than you would if you went out and tried to buy all this stuff separately, you know, through the accessories and then order this from Amazon by itself. It's a lot more work for more money, and this just makes sure you have everything you need. And by the way, the transfer switch comes with the conduit that you need. It comes with the clamps, comes with both a 90-degree elbow clamp and a straight through metal conduit clamp to attach to your service panel. So it gives you basically all the wires that you need in order to make that connection. So yeah, it's a complete solution, and it comes with everything you need. And I think it's definitely something that you should consider seriously if you want to connect this to your house. All right, I just heard the elements kick on the hot water heater. If we look over here on the one on the right, we can see we're pulling 2751, and the one on the left we are pulling 2745. So this is working like a champ. All right, so it has been just about 24 hours. We've been running the electric water heater off the AC300 system, and unsurprisingly, the electric water heater is a power-hungry beast. But still, the AC300 setup is able to handle it for at least a full day, maybe a bit more depending on how you use it. And you know, one thing that really quickly comes into focus when you start powering your everyday life off batteries is that we really use a lot of grid power because it's easy and it's convenient, and we don't typically have to give it all that much thought. But when you want to start replacing grid power with battery power, you absolutely do need to give some serious consideration to your power consumption needs and identify what's truly critical and what is optional. And then, of course, you do need to look for ways to try to efficiently utilize that power to the extent that you can. And of course, the conclusions you arrive at will also depend on your specific circumstances and what you actually want to do with a system like this. If you really need to run central air conditioning or an electric water heater, for example, these are very heavy lifts for pretty much any battery-based system, and you definitely want something with an inverter capacity in that, say, 9,000 to 10,000 watt range, 9,000 to 10,000 watt range or more. And this dual AC300 setup with its 6,000 watt combined inverter capacity is really not the best fit for that specific use case. But I think that realistically 75 to 80% of people aren't going to consider those things to be critical loads, especially for relatively short-term power backup purposes. And certainly if you had a couple of window air conditioning units and your water heater happens to run on gas, well, the AC300 setup is quite capable in that particular situation. And let's say you have a well pump, and if you do, that is something that you'd probably consider to be critical. And this dual AC300 setup can definitely handle that kind of intermittent load for an extended period of time. So I do think it's important to have realistic expectations about what your system can do, and I think this dual AC300 system still does make sense for the majority of people who are looking for a short-term power backup system that can handle their critical residential loads and provide the modular versatility to expand the system as your needs change, and maybe even have the option to take part of the system with you on the road if you're into RVing or boondocking type activities where you might not have shore power hookups for days at a time. And I really do love the fact that these expansion battery modules here can be used as a standalone DC power station all by themselves. It just kind of adds to the versatility you get with a system like this. Oh, and as I mentioned in my previous AC300 video, let's not forget about the time-based and PV priority UPS functions that are built into this system, which allow you to save money by moving a lot of your power consumption to off-peak electric rates or off-grid entirely if you've got a sizable solar array connected. So that, and the fact that this system does qualify for the 30% residential clean energy tax credit, I think that makes this an option worth serious consideration. And right now, BLUETTI does have some of their best pricing deals of the year going on. And if I can convince them to give me a discount code to share with you, I'll certainly leave that in the description below for you so you can get the best possible deal on a system like this, or maybe even something like the AC500 system if you do need a bit more inverter capacity. Okay, I think that's a wrap. If you did find anything helpful in this video, I'd really appreciate you clicking that like button for me. And if you have any questions remaining that I didn't get to in the video, please leave those in the comments below and I'll do my absolute best to try and respond to those questions. I do offer my sincere thanks for stopping by and watching this video, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, Have fun out there.